I thought today was going to be about love and celebration. I wore my best dress, held my son's hand, and smiled like everything was fine. My husband? Off mingling with relatives. My mother-in-law? Already judging from across the room, like always. I had been dreading this wedding for weeks. But I came anyway. It was my cousin Ashley's big day, a lush outdoor ceremony at a private estate in Connecticut, complete with white roses, a live acoustic duo, and enough extended family to fill 3 church pews. My husband, Mark, said we had to show up. Said it would look bad if we didn't, especially with his mom attending. I pushed back, but like always, I folded. We pulled up in our minivan around noon. I stepped out wearing a soft blush maxi dress, simple, elegant, not flashy. My hair was in a low twist, heels clicking gently on the cobblestone walkway. My makeup? Minimal. Intentional. I wasn't here to stand out. Just blend in and stay quiet. That's what marriage had taught me, how to disappear without ever leaving the room. My son, Jacob, held my hand tightly. Just 8, but perceptive. Too perceptive. He looked up at me and asked, "Why doesn't Grandma like you?" I smiled softly. "She's just tired." But we both knew she wasn't. Margaret, my mother-in-law, never hid her disapproval. I wasn't classy enough. I didn't grow up in the right neighborhood or shop at the right stores. She wanted a daughter-in-law with a law degree and a country club membership. I was just a public school teacher with student loans and a knack for cooking boxed mac and cheese. Inside the reception tent, everything buzzed. Champagne bottles popped. DJ tracks played too loud. Everyone hugged like it was Thanksgiving. I kept to myself. Helped line up cupcakes on the dessert table. Picked up a dropped napkin. Offered a bottle of water to an elderly aunt who looked overheated. Mark was nowhere. Typical. Probably chatting up his cousins, acting like our marriage wasn't held together with paperclips and compromise. Then she arrived. Margaret walked in like she owned the property, her hair perfectly blown out, wrapped in metallic silk, dripping in pearls, surrounded by her entourage of sisters and church friends. She scanned the room like royalty walking into a royal banquet. When her eyes met mine, she didn't nod. She didn't smile. She smirked. I turned back to the punch bowl, rearranging plastic cups to calm my nerves. I already had a pit in my stomach. That smirk? I'd seen it at every baby shower, every Thanksgiving, every forced family brunch. It meant she was gearing up to humiliate me again, this time, with an audience. I told Jacob to stay close and picked up a tray of lemonade glasses to help the overwhelmed servers. It was easier to stay busy than to sit at a table full of people pretending not to know I didn't belong. Then it happened. Her voice, loud and clear across the tent. "Look at her, already playing waitress. Did she even bring a gift, or is this it?" Laughter. Sharp, cruel laughter. I froze. The tray in my hands trembled. My cheeks burned. People turned. Some looked away. Others chuckled. And just when I thought I'd crumble, Jacob let go of my hand. I stood there, paralyzed. The tray of lemonade glasses suddenly felt like it weighed 100 pounds. My hands shook, but I clenched the tray tighter, desperate not to let it fall. My face burned with embarrassment. Shame pulled in my chest like concrete. Some people pretended not to hear. Others gave me that half-sympathetic, half-awkward look, the one you give a stranger when a joke goes too far, but you don't want to get involved. A few relatives even laughed politely, like they didn't want to upset the queen bee. Margaret always delivered her jabs with flair, loud enough to be accidental, cruel enough to wound. I looked around for Mark. Nowhere. Of course he wasn't here. He was probably by the fire pit with his cousins, talking about fantasy football and old road trips while his mother gutted me in front of a crowd. He always told me to let it go when she lashed out. "She doesn't mean it," he'd say. "It's just how she is." Easy for him to say. He wasn't the one being humiliated. Again. I slowly set the tray down on the table beside me and took a deep breath. trying to blink away the sting in my eyes. Not here. Not now. I would not cry in front of these people. Then I felt it, a tiny hand pulling on mine. Jacob. He looked up at me with his big, hazel eyes, his little brows furrowed. He didn't fully understand what had just happened, but he understood enough. He'd heard her tone, seen the looks, felt my silence. "Why did Grandma say that?" he whispered. I crouched beside him, tried to keep my voice steady. "It's okay," I said, smiling tightly. "Some people say mean things when they're unhappy. But that's not our fault." He stared at me for a second longer, then looked past me, toward the main stage where the MC was introducing the bridesmaids. I stood up again, hoping that moment would pass, that the music would drown it out, that people would move on. But I could feel their eyes. The judgment. The discomfort. My cousins didn't say a word. Even the ones who'd grown up with me looked away. Margaret, on the other hand, was in her element. Sitting comfortably at her round table near the head, sipping her wine, chuckling with her sisters like she hadn't just publicly sliced me down. I told myself to stay still. Stay silent. But then, Jacob let go of my hand. "Jacob," I whispered. "Where are you going?" He didn't answer. He walked toward the stage, slowly, deliberately. The music faded. Guests started whispering. And then he did the unthinkable. He climbed the 3 steps to the stage, walked right up to the microphone stand, and adjusted it with both hands. His shoulders were trembling, but his eyes were locked. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. Everyone turned. The MC stepped back. And Jacob leaned into the mic. Something was about to happen. Something that would shake the entire room. Jacob stood there, barely tall enough to reach the microphone, his little fingers gripping the edges of the stand like it was the only thing holding him upright. The entire tent fell into silence. A few people chuckled nervously, expecting some innocent kid moment, maybe a funny shout or a misplaced, "I love you, Mommy." But Jacob wasn't smiling. He cleared his throat. Then, with surprising strength in his voice, he said, "That's not the waitress. That's my mom." A ripple of confusion spread through the crowd. A couple of people chuckled again, unsure how to react. But Jacob didn't flinch. "She's my mom. She packed my lunch this morning. She helped decorate the dessert table even though no one asked her. She always helps people, even when no one notices." Now there was no laughter. Only silence. Every fork froze. Every conversation stopped. You could hear the soft breeze brushing the tent walls. I could feel every eye shifting toward me. And yet, somehow, it was Jacob's voice that held the whole room hostage. "She's the kindest person I know. And if anyone says she's just a help, then maybe they should ask what kind of help they've ever been." Dead silence. Then, slowly, Jacob turned his head and looked straight at Margaret. He didn't yell. He didn't cry. But his words hit like a hammer. "You say mean things because you think she won't say anything back. But I will." Margaret's smile vanished. She froze mid-sip, her wine glass trembling slightly. "She's not too quiet. She's just tired of pretending it doesn't hurt. And I don't want to pretend anymore." You could see people physically shift in their chairs. An uncle coughed into his drink. One of the bridesmaids covered her mouth. My husband, now standing at the bar, looked like someone had dropped a glass bottle beside him. Jacob looked back at the MC, handed him the microphone politely, and stepped down like he hadn't just lit the room on fire. And then he walked straight to me. My knees buckled. I dropped to the grass and caught him in a hug before he even reached me. His little arms wrapped around my neck, grounding me, lifting me, all at once. People watched, but I didn't care. For once, the eyes didn't feel invasive. They felt respectful. Because someone had finally said what I never could. As I stood back up, holding Jacob's hand, I looked across the room. Margaret sat stiffly in her chair, her entourage whispering in confusion. Her pearls didn't look so shiny now. And Mark? He didn't move. Not toward her. Not toward me. He just stared. Like he had no idea the storm he let brew for years would finally come from an 8-year-old in scuffed sneakers. And in that moment, I didn't feel small anymore. I felt seen. Not because I demanded it, but because someone who loved me refused to let me be invisible. I stood there in that tent, heels planted in soft grass, dress slightly wrinkled from hugging Jacob, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like a background character in my own life. I felt whole. Jacob held my hand tightly, his fingers still warm from clutching the mic just minutes ago. Around us, conversation started to buzz again, quieter, more careful. People weren't laughing anymore. They were watching with new eyes. Eyes that saw me. For so long, I had taught myself how to survive in silence. I'd let comments slide. I'd swallowed hurt with practiced smiles. I'd told myself I was being mature, keeping the peace. But it wasn't peace, it was submission. And Margaret had built her throne on top of it. But today, that throne cracked. Not because I finally snapped, but because my son refused to stay silent. Not out of rebellion. Out of love. And in doing so, he showed me what real courage looks like. One by one, guests approached. A second cousin I hadn't seen since Christmas handed me a napkin and whispered. That was, wow. An older woman from Mark's side gave Jacob a soft pat on the head. That's a good boy you're raising, she said before quietly slipping back into the crowd. It didn't matter what they said, really. Their words weren't the validation. It was their silence before, and their discomfort now, that said everything. Then I saw Mark. He was still standing by the bar, drink in hand, face pale. Our eyes met across the tent. He didn't smile. Didn't move. And for once, I didn't look away. I held his gaze for exactly 3 seconds, then turned my head toward Jacob and smiled instead. Because I didn't need Mark's defense anymore. I had raised someone who stood up for me when no one else ever did. In 60 seconds, my son had given me more strength than a decade of pretending ever had. As the evening went on and the dance floor filled up, Jacob and I stayed close. For once, we weren't stuck in the shadows or lingering at the edge of the party. We belonged right where we were. Later that night, as we packed up leftovers and helped Aunt Lisa with the folding chairs, one of Mark's distant aunts approached me. She was quiet, one of the neutral ones who never picked sides. She placed a hand gently on my shoulder and said, "You raised a lion, honey." And today he roared. I didn't have words. Just tears. The good kind. The real kind. Because she was right. Jacob didn't just defend me. He reminded me of who I was before I began shrinking. Before I gave my voice away to keep the peace. And that night, I promised myself something. I wouldn't shrink anymore. I didn't need to wait for Mark. Or for Margaret. Or for anyone else to finally see me. I already was enough. And I always had been. What would you have done in that moment? Drop your reaction in the comments. I'm reading all of them.